At 16:30 hours, a Ukrainian MiG-29 was screaming across Donetsk at 150 meters towards the dam at Mirolobivka, now a Russian supply highway. While the pilot had successfully used terrain to stay hidden so far, this would all change in a matter of minutes. Unknown to the pilot, 3 different Russian radar systems already had him painted. An S-400's Gravestone radar had locked him at 38 kilometers. The Tor M2 was tracking from the south, and a Buck M3 was warming up to the east. Enough overlapping missile coverage to turn any aircraft into aluminum confetti. The pilot's eyes locked on the reconnaissance feed streaming to his display. The dam at Mirolobivka had been turned into a superhighway of Russian supply trucks using Ukrainian civilian drivers. So in order to avoid civilian casualties, the strike had to happen now. The MiG-29 was following the Dnipro River Valley, using the natural depression in the terrain to mask his approach. Flying at 880 kilometers per hour, just 150 meters above the ground, he had one advantage. As long as he stayed in the valley, the surrounding hills blocked him from radar. But that protection would end in 8 minutes when the valley opened up into flat farmland. After that, the final 8 kilometers to the target would be completely exposed, what pilots call the shooting gallery. Through the HUD, the terrain rushed past at 236 meters per second. Power lines appeared and vanished faster than conscious thought could process. The pilot was flying on instinct and muscle memory, his hands making corrections before his brain registered the need. This wasn't flying, it was controlled falling with style. But avoiding becoming one with the Ukrainian countryside was the least of his concerns at this moment. The MiG's SPO-15 radar warning receiver was painting threats on its circular display like a very angry compass. Each strobe showed direction, but not distance. Knowing someone's yelling at you, but not sure if they're in your face or in the next room. The pilot counted the pulse repetition frequency like Mississippi's between lightning and thunder. The S-400 to the northeast was giving him slow, lazy sweeps. 3 Mississippis meant roughly 60 kilometers. Still searching. 2 Mississippis meant 40 kilometers. Getting interested. 1 Mississippi meant 20 kilometers and was probably already launching. Right now, he was getting 2.5 Mississippis of electromagnetic attention. Close enough to worry about, but far enough to have options. That calculation drove his next decision. Stay low for 8 more minutes. As the pilot was working through this in his head, his hammer bomb on his center line was running diagnostics every 5 seconds. GPS signal, strong, tracking 12 satellites. INS alignment, stable. Rocket motor, armed. The bomb needed specific conditions to reach the target. Conditions the pilot didn't have at 150 meters altitude. But thinking about that now was like worrying about dessert while your house was on fire. First, survive the approach. Then figure out how to deliver a €250,000 weapon with a Soviet jet that predated the internet. Complicating things further was his fuel gauge showed 2,400 kilograms remaining. Home was 142 kilometers round trip. At current consumption, that gave him 18 minutes over the target area before he was walking home. 18 minutes sounded like plenty until you factor in combat. Every evasive maneuver, every afterburner pulse, every climb would eat into that margin. The RD-33 engines were thirsty at low altitude, drinking fuel faster than a freshman at a college party. One extended evasion could eat all his fuel reserves. 8 kilometers to the edge of the valley. 8 kilometers of safety before entering what pilots call the shooting gallery. The drone overhead showed no vehicle movement at the dam. No helicopter inbound, no fighter scramble. Yet. The pilot pushed the throttles forward slightly, accelerating to 880 kilometers per hour. Every second he saved now was a second he could spend over the target, or a second less being shot at. In combat aviation, both are counted as wins. At 16:38 hours, the pilot reached the edge of the valley and discovered what radar coverage actually meant. The SPO-15 went from showing lazy search patterns to what sounds like a McDonald's kitchen during the lunch rush. 6 different emitters suddenly spiked in intensity. The S-400 that had been casually searching snapped to attention, its beam narrowing from a searchlight to a laser. The pilot had gone from invisible to center stage in half a second. The S-400's gravestone radar locked him up at 38 kilometers. The lock tone in his headset went from intermittent chirps to a solid scream that meant missile launch imminent. Here's how the MiG knew it was in trouble. The SPO-15 radar warning receiver has antennas all over the aircraft that detect radar energy hitting the plane. Think of it like having microphones that only hear radar waves. When a radar beam sweeps past you once every few seconds, you're being searched. The SPO-15 plays slow beeps. When that same radar starts hitting you multiple times per second and stays focused on you, you're being tracked. The beeps speed up. When radar locks on for a firing solution, it hits you continuously with a narrow, focused beam that doesn't let go. That's when you get the solid tone that means missiles are probably seconds away. The SPO-15 can even identify which type of radar it is by its unique frequency and pattern, like recognizing someone's voice. Right now, it was screaming that an S-400 had locked him solid. The engagement envelope of the S-400's 48N6 missile was 400 kilometers, but at low altitude, terrain and Earth curvature cut that to maybe 40. He was at 38. The math wasn't complicated. He was already within range. The only reason missiles weren't already flying was reaction time. Russian operators needed 8 seconds to transition from detection to launch. The pilot had 8 seconds to break the lock or take a missile to the face. The pilot rolled into a knife-edge turn, pulling 7 Gs while maintaining altitude. The maneuver put this velocity vector perpendicular to the radar beam. When you're not moving toward or away from a Doppler radar, you have the same relative speed as the ground beneath you. Zero radial velocity. Doppler radars work by detecting the frequency shift of moving objects. No movement toward the radar means no frequency shift. No frequency shift means you look exactly like terrain. The radar literally can't distinguish between you and the Earth you're flying over. The lock broke, but the maneuver cost him speed and position. He was now heading away from the target, sapping energy, and now everyone knew where he was. Suddenly, a Tor M2 lit up 8 kilometers south, close enough that the pilot could probably see the vehicle if he looked. The Tor was different from the S-400. It used command guidance instead of active radar homing. The missile didn't have its own seeker. Instead, the ground radar tracked both the target and the missile, sending course corrections via data link every 0.1 seconds. This made it nearly impossible to jam. You couldn't confuse a missile that wasn't thinking for itself. The only way to defeat it was to break the ground's radar lock or get outside its tracking limits. The pilot snap-rolled left and dove for the deck, dropping from 150 to 50 meters in 2 seconds. Trees flashed past the canopy close enough to count the leaves. As he dove, his left hand found the countermeasures panel. He punched the chaff dispenser twice. 120 bundles of aluminum-coated glass fibers erupted behind the aircraft. Each fiber cut to exactly 2.5 centimeters, half the wavelength of the S-400's X-band radar. To the gravestone radar, it looked like the MiG had suddenly exploded into a cloud the size of a football field. But the Tor operated in K-band at 35 gigahertz, requiring different length chaff. The pilot hit the second dispenser, releasing fibers cut to 4.3 millimeters. Now he had coverage across multiple radar bands, creating what pilots call a chaff corridor, a tunnel of false returns he could hide inside. The Tor's radar tried to track, but kept losing him in ground returns. At just 50 meters, he might as well have been driving a very fast car as far as radar was concerned. But the pilot wasn't done. His left thumb found the ECM pod switch. The Nearty SPS-141 jamming pod came alive, analyzing the Tor's radar frequency and generating false returns using something called range gate pull-off. It works like this. Imagine the radar as a flashlight beam searching for the aircraft. When it finds the plane, it focuses tightly on that spot to track it. The jamming pod creates a fake aircraft, a bright electronic decoy that appears right next to the real plane on the radar screen. Then the jammer slowly moves this fake signal away from the real aircraft. Like sliding a bright light away from an object in the dark, the radar's operator screen shows 2 targets that gradually separate. Since the fake signal is stronger and brighter, the radar automatically follows it, thinking that it's tracking the real plane. Meanwhile, the actual MiG becomes just another ground return, invisible in the clutter. On the operator's screen, he'd see what looks like the aircraft slowly climbing and moving away, while in reality, the MiG is still skimming the ground, heading into a completely different direction. The TOR's operator was now tracking a ghost that didn't exist, while the real MiG disappeared into terrain clutter. But flying at 50 meters meant flying on borrowed time. One power line, one unexpected hill, one moment of inattention, and he'd become part of the landscape. The pilot had to climb soon or risk what the accident report would call controlled flight into terrain. Bureaucracy's way of saying flew into the ground while fully conscious. The release point was now 8 kilometers ahead. Whatever he was going to do, it had to happen now. The pilot made a choice that would have failed him in flight school, but might keep him alive in combat. Instead of maintaining tactical advantage, he'd create chaos. If everyone was shooting at him, no one could coordinate. It's the aviation equivalent of starting a bar fight. Messy, dangerous, but sometimes the confusion was its own defense. His left hand moved to the countermeasures panel, ready to dump everything he had. His right hand gripped the stick, prepared for what instructors called gross maneuvering, and what pilots called trying not to die. 4 kilometers now from the minimum release point. The next 60 seconds would determine whether this mission became a success story or a cautionary tale. The fuel gauge showed 2,150 kilograms. Still enough time to get home if nothing goes wrong. But in combat, something always goes wrong. The only question was how wrong and whether you could survive it. At 1640 hours, the pilot did something that would make every threat receiver in eastern Ukraine lose its mind. He lit the afterburners and pulled straight up. The twin RD-33 engines roared to maximum thrust, orange flames extending 6 meters behind the aircraft. He went from invisible to broadcasting his position like a lighthouse on fire. Every radar operator within 80 kilometers just got their Christmas present early. Inside the S-400 command vehicle, the operator's eyes widened as the target went from barely visible ground clutter to a bright climbing contact. His fingers flew across the console. Target altitude climbing through 1,000 meters. Rate of climb 330 meters per second. Predicted altitude in 10 seconds 5,000 meters. The fire control computer began calculating an intercept solution, but the target's trajectory kept changing. Every second required a new calculation. The operator selected 2 missiles and initiated the launch sequence. Authorization from battery commander granted. Missile doors opening. Target data uploading to missiles. Launch in 5, 4, 3. The climb was insane. From 50 meters to 5,000 meters in 18 seconds, pulling 4 Gs continuously. The pilot's body weight quadrupled. His arms felt like they were made of lead. His head like someone was standing on it. His G-suit inflated, squeezing his legs and abdomen like a python. But at 4 Gs sustained, grayout was beginning. Peripheral vision was fading to tunnel vision. At 5 Gs, he'd lose color vision. At 6 Gs, tunnel vision would close to a point. At 9 Gs, he'd have 3 seconds before G-lock. G-induced loss of consciousness. He was riding the edge at 4 Gs sustained, buying altitude with his remaining consciousness. But the maneuver had a method to its madness. By going vertical, he'd made himself impossible to ignore, but also impossible to predict. The pilot added a barrel roll to the climb, corkscrewing upward in a helix pattern. To the SAM operators, his trajectory looked like a snake climbing a spiral staircase. The fire control computers were designed to predict ballistic paths, where something going X speed at Y angle would be in Z seconds. But the barrel roll meant constantly changing angles. The predicted intercept point moved in circles, never staying still long enough for a clean firing solution. SAM operators had to constantly upgrade their firing solutions as his altitude changed 400 meters per second. 3 different fire control radars achieved lock simultaneously. The S-400 to the northeast, a Buck M3 to the east, and that persistent Tor M2 to the south. The RWR wasn't displaying individual threats anymore. It just screamed like a rabid Karen. The pilot's response was to roll inverted at the top of his climb and pull through, creating a trajectory that looked like a child's drawing of a loop. No computer predicted that because no sane pilot would do it. At 5,000 meters, inverted, nose pointing at the ground, the pilot finally had what he needed. The hammer could reach the target from here. The weapon system showed green across the board. But he was also centered in 3 different engagement envelopes with missiles probably already in the air. The SPO-15 couldn't differentiate between tracking and launch. It just screamed that an early retirement was in his immediate future if something didn't change right now. Time to either release or abort. No middle ground. The pilot rolled upright and steadied the aircraft for exactly 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, the hammer's initialization sequence ran at electronic speed. First, the GPS receiver verified position from 12 satellites, comparing each signal to ensure none were spoofed. Second, the INS aligned its accelerometers with GPS data, creating dual redundant navigation. Third, the rocket motor ran a continuity check on its igniter. Fourth, the infrared seeker performed a calibration cycle, cooling to -40°C with compressed nitrogen. Fifth, the flight control computer loaded the target coordinates and calculated optimal trajectory. Sixth, the warhead performed a safe arm check, all green, ready for release. Time elapsed 2 seconds. Meanwhile, 2 S-400 missiles left their launchers climbing at 2,000 meters per second toward his position. The 48 NDM missiles were 7.5 meters of bad news accelerating at 30 Gs. Each carried a 180-kilogram warhead that didn't need to hit directly. Proximity fuse would detonate within 20 meters of the target, sending 24,000 fragments in a lethal sphere. Time to intercept, 35 seconds. With missiles inbound, he pressed the pickle button and felt 250 kilograms of French engineering separate from Soviet aluminum. The MiG jumped up like someone had removed a backpack, suddenly lighter and infinitely more agile. The instant the weapon cleared, the pilot rolled inverted and pulled toward the earth with everything the airframe could handle. 9.5 Gs. The edge of structural limits. Something in the left wing root made a sound that wasn't quite a crack, but wasn't quite nothing. He ignored it. The aircraft was bending but not breaking, and bent was better than exploding. The dive took him from 5,000 meters to 500 meters in 8 seconds, accelerating past the speed of sound. The Mach transition was intense, to say the least. Wind was shaking the aircraft as shockwaves formed and collapsed around the wings. Airspeed indicators showing Mach 1.1 and climbing. The S-400 missiles tried to follow, but couldn't match the trajectory change. They'd been aimed at where he would be if he continued climbing or flew level. Nobody predicted a supersonic dive toward the Earth. The missile seekers tried to track, but lost lock as the MiG disappeared below their minimum tracking angle. The missiles continued ballistic, searching for a target that was no longer there before self-destructing at 8,000 meters. The hammer's rocket motor had ignited the moment it separated, pushing the bomb up while the aircraft went down. 2 objects that had been won, now heading in opposite directions at maximum speed. The bomb climbed over 8,000 meters, trading speed for altitude, preparing for its terminal dive. The pilot leveled off at 100 meters, threading between hills and using terrain to mask his escape. The missile threat was behind him, but fuel was becoming the enemy. The afterburner climb had sucked down 400 kilograms in 12 seconds. Home was now a math problem with one answer: fly perfect or walk. Behind him, the Buck M3 launched at the hammer, mistaking it for the aircraft. The missile would chase a bomb that couldn't evade, wasting a $1 million interceptor on a target that was already committed to its trajectory. It's like shooting a bullet that's already been fired. Satisfying, but pointless. The dam was less than a minute away from discovering why infrastructure and military logistics shouldn't share space. Within 30 seconds, the hammer reached its highest point at 8,200 meters and tipped into its terminal dive. The infrared seeker activated, scanning the ground below in thermal wavelengths. The seeker's detector array, cooled to -40°C, could detect temperature differences of 0.1 degrees. The dam appeared as a bright white line against the cool blue of water. 8 hours of sunlight had heated the concrete to 35°C, while the water remained at 15 degrees. A 20-degree differential that looked like someone had painted "Impact Here" in thermal paint. The seeker's computer analyzed the shape, comparing it to preloaded templates. Linear structure confirmed. Temperature gradient consistent with concrete. Confirmed. GPS position within 10 meters of target. Confirmed. The bomb made a 2.1 degree correction, now certain that it had the right target. The bomb accelerated through 300 meters per second, then 320, then 340. At this velocity, the control fins made micro-adjustments measured in millimeters, each tiny movement changing the impact point by meters. The GPS confirmed position while the INS measured every acceleration. Two independent systems agreeing on one outcome: impact in 10 seconds at exactly the same coordinates. 8 kilometers away, the Ukrainian drone operator watched through his camera as the hammer entered its terminal phase. His finger hovered over the record button. This footage would be on Telegram within the hour. The dam below looked peaceful, unaware that it had 7 seconds left as infrastructure. 6 seconds. 5. The operator zoomed in on the predicted impact point. 3, 2, 1. The hammer struck at 340 meters per second, carrying kinetic energy equivalent to a Nissan Altima hitting a wall at 2,000 miles per hour. The smart fuse detected concrete and detonated the 89 kilograms of explosive in less than a millisecond. The detonation created a pressure wave of 300,000 psi, turning concrete into powder faster than it could crack. The shock wave propagated through the dam at 5,000 meters per second, causing the opposite side to explode outward before the impact side finished collapsing. The breach widened to 60 meters in the first minute as erosion undermined the remaining structure. The crossing point that had supported battalion-level logistics for 3 months ceased to exist in less time than a commercial break. Russian supply lines just got a 47-kilometer extension they didn't budget for. Bye for now.